She looked me straight in the eye and said, "You didn't contribute, so you don't get to eat." Those words in the cold, sharp, and soaked in arrogance and have never left my heart. I remember that weekend like it happened yesterday. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of laughter from the living room, and me, standing there in the kitchen, holding an empty plate. I wasn't angry at first, just stunned. My stepdaughter, whom I'd helped raise, whom I'd fed, loved, and defended like my own, was now looking at me like I was a burden. I'm not someone who likes conflict. I've always been the quiet one, the kind of woman who believes love can fix things, that patience can heal any wound. I'm a single mom and life hasn't been easy. I've worked long hours taking care of a home I didn't build, and carried a heart full of forgiveness even when people didn't deserve it. But that day something inside me changed. My husband Daniel passed away 5 years ago. He was my best friend, my strength. He had a daughter from his first marriage. Her name is Claire. When we got married, Claire was only 16. She was distant at first, but Daniel always told me, "She just needs time." I tried everything to be close to her. I'd cook her favorite meals, help with her school projects, and sit by her side when she cried over small heartbreaks. Slowly, I thought we were becoming a family, but things changed after Daniel's passing. Claire inherited most of his estate, the house, the car, the savings. I never cared much about money, but she did. From the day the lawyer read the will, something in her eyes shifted. She stopped seeing me as a stepmother and started treating me like a leftover. Responsibility. Someone who was no longer useful. Still, I stayed, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I believed in honoring Daniel's memory. I thought maybe in time, Claire would see my intentions and learn to respect me. But respect never came. Instead came that weekend. It was supposed to be a quiet one. Claire had invited some of her friends over for a casual get-together. I offered to help around the house, prepare food, clean the backyard, maybe bake something sweet. She looked at me and said, "You can just relax this time." I took that as kindness. I didn't know she meant stay out of the way. As the evening came, I could smell the food. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, salad, and a warm apple pie. The laughter grew louder. The house was alive, but no one called me to join. I waited, sitting quietly in my room, telling myself maybe they were still setting the table. When I finally walked to the dining area, the table was full. Every seat taken, except mine. I stood there for a moment, frozen. The music was soft, the chatter casual. Claire glanced at me with that same cold smile and said, "Oh, we didn't count you in. You didn't really contribute to the groceries, did you?" It wasn't the words themselves that hurt, when it was the tone. Like I was some stranger, some uninvited guest in my own home. No one spoke. Her friends awkwardly looked down. I could feel my throat tighten, my eyes sting, but I didn't want to make a scene. I simply nodded, smiled faintly, and walked back to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the sound of laughter from the other side of the wall. That's when the realization hit me. Sometimes, kindness makes people forget you're human too. That night I didn't cry. I just stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment. I'd been overlooked, every small humiliation. I'd swallowed in silence. The woman who believed love could heal everything finally understood. Love doesn't fix arrogance. It only exposes it. But here's the thing about people like me. Quiet doesn't mean weak. I wasn't going to shout, I wasn't going to argue. But I knew I would teach her a lesson she'd never forget. Not out of anger, not for revenge, but because respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn when you finally see what you've lost. So I planned something simple. It wouldn't hurt her physically or ruin her life. It would just make her see, really see the person she had become. That weekend was the turning point. The line between family and stranger, love and pride, was drawn in silence, and by the next morning, the lesson had already begun, the weekend. That changed everything, full extended version. I never thought something as simple as a weekend meal could break my heart. But that's exactly what happened. It started like any other. Saturday morning, sunlight slipping through half-closed blinds, the faint hum of traffic outside, the smell of coffee brewing in the pot. The house was quiet, almost peaceful. For a moment, I forgot how much had changed since Daniel passed away. Then I remembered. The empty chair at the end of the table reminded me of him every morning. He used to read the newspaper aloud, sometimes humming under his breath, sometimes teasing me about how I put too much sugar in my coffee. He was the balance between me and Claire, his daughter, my stepdaughter. Without him, that balance was gone, and so was the warmth. Claire wasn't always this cold. When I married her father, she was 16, shy, a little distant but not unkind. We bonded slowly. I helped her with college applications, stayed up late when she was nervous about her exams, and made her favorite pancakes every Sunday. For a few years, I thought we had built something real, but when Daniel got sick, everything started to crumble. By the time he passed, she barely looked at me. Now she was 25, working a decent job, living with me because the mortgage was still under both our names. I didn't mind. I thought maybe eventually we'd find some middle ground. That hope died last weekend. She had organized a dinner with a few friends, loud, cheerful young professionals, all talking about their promotions and weekend trips. I stayed out of their way. By the time he passed, she barely looked at me. Now she was 25, working a decent job, living with me because the mortgage was still under both our names. I didn't mind. I thought maybe eventually we'd find some middle ground. That hope died last weekend. She had organized a dinner with a few friends, loud, cheerful young professionals, all talking about their promotions and weekend trips. I stayed out of their way, cleaned the kitchen, and thought maybe I'd join them for dessert. But when I came out of my room, I saw the plates, and 6 of them, all served neatly, except there wasn't one for me. I stood there, trying not to make it awkward. "Oh," I said softly. "I didn't realize we were starting dinner." Claire turned, her voice sharp and careless. "Yeah, we didn't have enough portions for everyone. Besides, you didn't contribute this time, so..." The words hit harder than I expected. Didn't contribute. I'd spent the week cleaning, organizing, keeping this house functional. I'd bought groceries from my pension. I'd made the space comfortable so she could bring her friends. But none of that mattered to her. The silence that followed was heavier than her words. Her friends shifted uncomfortably. I just smiled, a small, broken smile, and said, "Of course. Enjoy your dinner." I went back to my room, closed the door, and sat there for a while, listening to the sound of laughter echoing through the house. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was just hollow. The next morning, she came down in her robe, scrolling through her phone like nothing happened. "Morning," she said casually. "Good morning," I replied, my voice calm, almost too calm. She made herself toast, juice, and left crumbs all over the counter. I didn't say anything. I just watched her, and something inside me shifted. For years, I had kept peace at any cost. But peace without respect isn't peace. It's silence. That day, I decided I was done being invisible. I didn't cook. I didn't do laundry. I didn't clean the dishes she left behind. Instead, I packed some of the food I'd bought that week, the bread, the fruit, the soup, and took it to my neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. Mrs. Jenkins lived alone, a kind woman with soft eyes and hands that smelled of lavender. When she saw the bags, she almost cried. "You always think of others," she said. Her words warmed something inside me, something Claire's didn't. We talked for a while on her porch. She told me, "Sometimes people only realize your worth when you stop giving." I didn't say anything, but I knew she was right. That evening, when Claire came home, she opened the fridge and frowned. "Where's all the food?" "I gave it away," I said simply. Her eyebrows shot up. "You what?" I looked at her calmly. "You said I didn't contribute, remember? So I thought it was only fair that I take away what I did contribute." She didn't respond right away. Her face flushed, in part guilt, part embarrassment. She mumbled something and went upstairs. For the first time in years, I felt no anger, just peace. Sometimes the quietest actions make the loudest statements. And that night, as I sat by the window with my cup of tea, I realized something. Revenge doesn't always need to be cruel. Sometimes it just means showing someone what life looks like without your kindness. That was the weekend everything began to change. The next week started with an odd stillness. I didn't change my routine, not really, but something inside me had. I stopped waiting for gratitude that would never come.
I still made coffee for myself, still watered the plants.
Still read my book by the window. But I didn't rush to make breakfast or dinner or fix things that Claire left undone. It was strange how quickly the house started reflecting her effort, or lack of it. By Tuesday, dishes had piled up in the sink. By Thursday, laundry overflowed from the basket. And by Friday evening, even she noticed. "Didn't you do laundry this week?" she asked, standing by the washer with an annoyed expression. I looked up from my book. "No," I said simply. "I've been busy." She frowned, clearly surprised. "Busy with what?" "Taking care of my own things," I replied calmly. "You're old enough to handle yours." For a moment she looked like she wanted to argue. But she didn't. She just rolled her eyes and left the room. I went back to my book, pretending not to see how unsettled she looked. By Saturday morning, her frustration had started to build. I could hear her in the kitchen, opening cupboards, sighing, and muttering to herself. The milk was spoiled, the bread was finished, and the sink was still full. I waited. Eventually, she appeared in the doorway of the living room, arms crossed. "So what's going on?" she demanded. "You've been different lately." I smiled faintly. "Different how?" "You're not helping around like you used to." I put my book down slowly. "Claire, I've realized something. I was doing everything to keep this home running, but I was treated like a guest in it, so I'm just acting accordingly." Her mouth opened, but no words came. For once, she had nothing to say. That weekend, she tried to cook dinner. The smell of burnt chicken filled the kitchen. I offered to help, but she waved me off. Pride, or maybe guilt, wouldn't let her accept it. She ended up ordering food instead, and even that arrived cold. When she finally sat down, I saw something in her eyes, and not anger this time, but discomfort. Maybe even reflection. The silence between us stretched longer than usual. I didn't break it. For years, I'd filled every pause with kindness, every cold look with patience. But not anymore. This new silence wasn't bitter. It was peaceful, deliberate, powerful. That night, while cleaning up my side of the house, I found an old photo album in the drawer, one Daniel and I had made years ago. The first picture was of all three of us, standing by the lake laughing, our arms around each other. The silence between us stretched longer than usual. I didn't break it. For years, I'd filled every pause with kindness, every cold look with patience, but not anymore. This new silence wasn't bitter. It was peaceful, deliberate, powerful. That night, while cleaning up my side of the house, I found an old photo album in the drawer, one Daniel and I had made years ago. The first picture was of all three of us, standing by the lake laughing, our arms around each other. Claire was 17 in that photo, smiling, genuinely happy. I stared at it for a long time, wondering when that version of her disappeared. When I went to bed, I placed the album on the table outside her door. I didn't say anything. I just left it there. The next morning it was gone. She didn't mention it, not a word. But later that day I noticed she'd washed the dishes without being asked. It wasn't perfect and a few spots still left on the plates, but it was something. Over the next few days she started doing small things, taking the trash out, making coffee for both of us, asking if I needed anything from the store. Not exactly affection, but gestures that carried a hint of realization. One evening while we sat in the living room, she spoke quietly. "You know, I didn't mean what I said that night," she murmured, not meeting my eyes. "About not contributing." I took a sip of tea, my voice gentle. "I know, but words still leave a mark." She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "I guess I just didn't see it before." "I know you didn't," I said. "Sometimes people only learn through silence what kindness tried to teach with words." For the first time in years, the room didn't feel heavy. It felt honest. Later, when I went to bed, I felt something in my chest ease, not triumph, but closure. "I didn't need an apology," shouted from rooftops. That small moment of understanding was enough, because in the end, life has a way of teaching lessons without cruelty. You just have to stop saving people from learning them. The morning. Light barely filtered through the blinds, but it felt heavier than usual. I could hear the faint sound of Claire's music coming from her room, upbeat, careless, and completely unaware of the storm that had brewed between us over the weekend. I had gone about my routine quietly, making coffee, checking the mailbox, and tidying up the small corner of the living room I liked to keep just for myself. The house was silent in a way that demanded reflection. For the first time, I realized that silence could be louder than any argument. Claire finally came down the stairs around 10 a.m., wrapped in her oversized hoodie, hair messy from sleep. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in weeks, I saw hesitation. She had that same look I used to see on kids in school who knew they'd broken a rule but weren't sure what the consequences would be. Can we talk?" she said softly. She had that same look, I used to see on kids in school who knew they'd broken a rule but weren't sure what the consequences would be. Can we talk? She said softly. I gestured toward the couch. Of course, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. I wasn't looking for an apology. I was waiting for acknowledgement. She sat down, hands twisting nervously in her lap. About last weekend. I shouldn't have said what I said. About not contributing. I didn't think about how that sounded. I nodded slowly, taking in her words. This wasn't just about dinner. It was about everything she had taken for granted over the years. My patience, my efforts, my quiet presence in her life. She had never seen it until now. It's appreciated that you said that, I said carefully. But it's not the words that matter, it's understanding. Words fade, actions stay. I'm more interested in whether you understand the impact of your words. Her eyes dropped to the floor. I didn't realize. I thought you'd always take care of everything. That you'd always handle it. There it was. The truth unspoken for so long. She had assumed my care and love were unlimited. And now facing the reality, she seemed small. You're realizing it now, I said gently. And that's a start. Understanding comes first. Respect and gratitude come later. It's not about guilt, it's about awareness. She blinked, tears forming at the edge of her eyes. I feel awful. I didn't mean to hurt you. I guess I just didn't see it before. I know, I said. And now you do. That's all that matters. People don't always realize what they have until they stop expecting it to be there forever. She nodded, silent for a few moments, just letting the words settle. Then she whispered, almost like a question, Do you forgive me? I smiled softly. Forgiveness isn't the point. Understanding is. When you truly see how your words and actions affect someone, that's the real change. That's the lesson. For the first time, I saw a shift. Her shoulders relaxed slightly and she met my gaze. Hesitant but more honest than I had seen in years. This was the beginning of something, not perfection. Not a sudden return to the happy family I once imagined. But awareness. And awareness, I knew, was the foundation for everything else. The days following Claire's hesitant apology felt different. Not dramatic, not overnight, but quietly. I noticed the little things first. The subtle ways she started leaving the kitchen a bit cleaner, or making her bed without being asked. Small, almost invisible gestures. But to me, they carried more weight than 1,000 words. I would sit in the living room with my tea, watching her move through the house, and I realized how often I had done these things for her without thinking. Picking up after her, cooking her favorite meals, making sure the house was presentable. When her friends came over. I had never asked for gratitude. I had only wanted respect. Simple recognition that I was part of this home. Part of her life. And now slowly she was starting to see. It wasn't perfect. Not by a long shot. There were still moments of carelessness. The occasional forgotten cup of juice. The stray pair of shoes left in the hallway. But she was noticing, adjusting. For the first time, she seemed aware of her presence in the space, instead of assuming it revolved around her. One Friday evening, I was folding laundry in the bedroom when I heard her approach. Hey, she said softly. I looked up. She held a small stack of freshly folded shirts in her hands. I thought I'd help this time, she said, voice almost shy. I smiled. Thank you, I said, accepting them. It's appreciated. Her cheeks flushed slightly. I mean it. I want to, do better. I know I've been selfish. There it was again, acknowledgement. That one word, selfish, carried years of tension and misunderstanding. I nodded quietly, letting it sink in. Later that night, we sat at the kitchen table. A quiet scene unlike any weekend before. I had made a simple dinner. Roasted chicken, salad, a loaf of bread I had baked that morning. She didn't ask for anything special, didn't complain. She simply sat across from me, quietly helping set the table. You know, she began hesitantly. I've been thinking a lot about how I treated you. I didn't realize how much you do for me. For the house. For everything. I just assumed it was always there. Her words were raw, sincere, and a little clumsy. But they were hers. For years, no amount of polite reminders or quiet patience had penetrated that wall of arrogance. And now slowly cracks were appearing. I nodded, holding back my own emotions. I know, I said. And now that you see it, you can make a choice. Keep ignoring it or do something different. She looked down at her plate, chewing slowly. I want to do something different. I don't want to keep making the same mistakes. That night I went to bed with a strange sense of relief. Not victory, not revenge, and just a quiet satisfaction that sometimes patience, boundaries, and a little distance are the most powerful teachers. The next morning, the first real test came. Claire was supposed to meet her friends for brunch, but she asked if I wanted to join. My heart skipped a beat. She had never invited me before. I thought maybe we could go together this time, she said a little awkwardly. I hesitated, seeing the effort behind the words. I'd like that, I said softly. The brunch wasn't perfect. There were still small moments where Claire slipped, a casual complaint about the coffee being too hot, or a distracted look at her phone. But there were also moments of genuine connection. Smiles shared across the table, quiet laughter, and for the first time, a subtle recognition of my presence. Driving back home, she glanced at me. Thanks for coming, she said. I enjoy your company more than I thought I would. I smiled, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about seeing her take the first steps toward respect. Empathy and awareness nurture all along, qualities I had hoped to by the end of that week. She was helping more often around the house. Not because I asked, not out of fear of consequence, but because she had begun to see the value of small acts, folding laundry, without being reminded, cooking a meal, cleaning up after herself. I realized something important. Change doesn't happen overnight. It comes quietly in small gestures, in moments of reflection, and in the gradual recognition of someone else's. Realize something important. Change doesn't happen overnight. It comes quietly in small gestures, in moments of reflection, and in the gradual recognition of someone else's efforts. That weekend, I watched her bake cookies for a neighbor who had just moved in. She smiled genuinely, laughing at the little flour smudges on her apron. And for the first time, I felt proud. Not because she had done exactly what I expected, but because she was learning empathy on her own. And in that moment, I understood the truth. The best lessons aren't forced. They are lived. They are experienced. They are discovered through small acts of awareness, not through shouting or confrontation, what I expected, but because she was learning empathy on her own. And in that moment, I understood the truth. The best lessons aren't forced. They are lived. They are experienced. They are discovered through small acts of awareness, not through shouting or confrontation. Claire still had a long way to go. Arrogance, selfishness, and entitlement don't disappear overnight. But the shift had begun, and that was enough. Because once someone starts to see the consequences of their actions, even subtly, true change becomes possible. And as I sat in the living room that night, sipping tea and listening to the quiet hum of the house, I realized something I hadn't in years. Life has a way of teaching lessons without cruelty, if we are patient enough to let them unfold. The house had started to feel different. Not loud or dramatic, but lighter. The tension that had lingered for months, maybe even years, and seemed to dissolve in subtle ways. I noticed it first in the mornings. Claire would make coffee without being reminded, sometimes even asking if I wanted cream or sugar. It wasn't grand gestures that marked the change, but small, deliberate ones. She left the kitchen cleaner than before, folded the laundry neatly, and even occasionally prepared a meal just for the two of us. I could see her trying to create harmony in a way she had never done when she took for granted my constant care. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and spilled golden light into the living room, Claire came up to me with a tray of snacks. I thought we could have a little movie night, she said, a shy smile tugging at her lips. I raised an eyebrow, pleasantly surprised. Movie night for us? Yes, she replied, a hint of nervousness in her voice. I wanted to spend time with you, without distractions, without anything else. Just us. It was a small invitation, but it felt monumental. I set aside my book and joined her on the couch, the tray between us. She had picked one of Daniel's favorite films, an old classic. He used to hum along to while cooking dinner. As the opening credits rolled, I realized how much our home had shifted. The cold distance that once separated us was slowly giving way to mutual respect, understanding, and even affection. During the film, she laughed at the right moments, glanced at me when a particularly sentimental scene appeared, and whispered observations. Not a single complaint, not a harsh word, just genuine presence. It struck me how much had changed, not overnight, but through countless small decisions, each one building trust and awareness. Later, when the movie ended and the room was dim except for the flickering screen, Claire turned to me. I just wanted to say thank you. For everything. For being patient, for not giving up on me. Even when I didn't deserve it. Her words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. For years I had endured indifference, subtle disrespect, and casual dismissal. And now finally I felt recognized, and not because I demanded it, but because she had earned the understanding on her own. You don't need to thank me, I said softly. You're learning to see things differently now, and that matters more than anything. She nodded, her eyes reflecting a mix of pride, guilt, and sincerity. I know, and I want to keep learning. I don't want to go back to being careless or selfish. Over the next few weeks, I saw a continued transformation. Claire would bring me small surprises, a favorite tea, a book she knew I'd enjoy, a note left on my pillow with a simple, heartfelt message. She began inviting me to join her in activities she once reserved only for her friends. Weekends that used to be tense or indifferent now carried laughter, shared stories, and mutual respect. One Saturday morning, she suggested a trip to the park. It's a beautiful day, she said, slipping her hand into mine with a quiet warmth. Let's go together. As we walked under the sprawling oak trees, sunlight filtering through the leaves, I reflected on the journey we had taken. From denial, arrogance, and subtle cruelty to awareness, reflection, and genuine care. It was almost cinematic how life had guided her toward empathy and understanding. By the time we returned home, I realized something profound. Relationships aren't built in moments of perfection. They are crafted in the quiet. Consistent efforts in noticing, listening, sharing, and valuing each other. And Claire, despite her early arrogance and carelessness, had begun to grasp that truth. That evening, as we prepared dinner together, she paused, looked at me, and smiled. I'm really glad we're learning to do this together, she said. I feel like I finally understand what family really means. And in that moment, I realized that the lessons of patience, quiet resilience, and subtle boundaries had finally borne fruit. Not revenge, not confrontation, but understanding and growth, the kind that truly heals hearts and builds bridges. The house no longer felt heavy or tense. It was filled with small gestures, laughter, and a mutual respect that had been missing for far too long. And as I looked at Claire, now fully aware of her actions and their impact, I knew that we were finally moving toward a genuine bond, one built on care, awareness, and shared humanity. For the first time in years, I felt a deep sense of peace, not because past wounds had disappeared, but because growth, understanding, and empathy had begun to fill the space they once occupied. And in that quiet, enduring change, I realized that life's most powerful lessons are often those taught not with anger, but with patience, presence, and the courage to let others discover their own awareness. The following days felt like a gentle shift in the rhythm of the house. Mornings weren't rushed or tense anymore. Claire had started making breakfast occasionally, pancakes with syrup for me, scrambled eggs for herself. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes she burned the toast or forgot the coffee. But the effort was there, and that mattered more than flawless execution. I noticed how she began to ask questions, not just about her own plans or friends, but about my day, my thoughts, even my small routines. It was subtle at first. Did you sleep well? Would you like me to water the plants? Do you need help with anything today? Each of these tiny gestures built a bridge I thought might never exist. It wasn't about impressing anyone or showing off to friends. It was genuine. One afternoon, as I sat folding laundry, Claire came into the room holding a photo album, the same one from years ago that had held pictures of all of us at the lake. She flipped it open and looked at me, her eyes soft. I was looking at these, and I realized how much I didn't notice before, she said. I thought family was just living in the same house, sharing space. I didn't understand that it's about noticing, caring, and helping each other. I set the laundry aside and joined her on the couch. That's right, I said gently. Family isn't just about presence. It's about acknowledgement and respect. And it seems you're finally learning that. She smiled a little shyly. I want to do better, she said. I want to be someone who notices the little things like you've always done for me. Not because I have to, but because it matters. That evening, we decided to cook dinner together. It was a small thing, but it became a ritual of sorts. Claire chopped vegetables while I stirred sauces, and we laughed at minor mistakes, like a stray piece of carrot falling on the floor. It felt light and real, a far cry from the tension-filled weekends before. Over the next few weeks, the changes became more consistent. Claire would volunteer to run small errands, carry groceries inside without being asked, or help me clean up after cooking. It was a pattern of awareness, not obligation. One weekend, she suggested we host a small dinner for Daniel's colleagues who were visiting town. I hesitated. Past experiences had taught me that Claire's involvement in hosting could be chaotic. But this time, she took initiative in planning the menu, setting the table, and ensuring everyone felt welcome. Watching her move confidently yet considerately, I felt a swelling of pride. She had learned to balance her personality, the outgoing, occasionally self-centered teen, with genuine thoughtfulness and empathy. During the dinner, she handled guests gracefully, engaging in conversation and making sure I wasn't overworked. After everyone left, she turned to me, exhausted but smiling. "See," she said, "we did it together. I couldn't have done this alone, and I didn't have to. I wanted to help, and I think it made a difference." "Yes," I said softly, placing a hand on hers. "It did. And that's how respect grows, in small actions. Consistent effort and genuine care." By the end of the night, the atmosphere in the house felt completely different. Laughter replaced silent tension. Shared responsibility replaced assumptions, and mutual understanding replaced frustration. I realized that what had begun as a lesson, subtle and patient, was now transforming into a relationship built on trust, recognition, and a deeper sense of family. That night, as I sat in the quiet of the living room, I reflected on the journey. The long, patient waiting, the boundaries I had set, the silence I had allowed. It had worked. Claire had learned the lesson not through anger or confrontation, but through experience and awareness. I smiled to myself. Life had a way of teaching the right lessons at the right time. And when those lessons were learned, relationships could be repaired, trust rebuilt, and bridges strengthened, one small gesture at a time. The first sign of real change came one Monday morning. Claire had woken earlier than usual, a small detail, but a detail that signaled a shift. She was in the kitchen humming softly, chopping vegetables for breakfast. "I thought I'd try making something before you woke up," she said, glancing at me with a faint smile. "Just a small breakfast and nothing fancy." I watched her move around the kitchen, precise and careful yet relaxed. There was no arrogance, no dismissive attitude. Only effort, only awareness. "You're taking initiative," I said, keeping my tone gentle. "I like that." She nodded, looking down at the counter. "I want someone to tell me what to do anymore. I think I understand now. Responsibility isn't just about chores. It's about noticing the impact of your actions on others." I smiled softly. Finally, she had internalized the lesson. She wasn't just performing tasks. She was reflecting on her behavior, recognizing her past mistakes, and making conscious choices to act differently. Later that day, she suggested we go grocery shopping together. Not because she was told to, but because she genuinely wanted to help with planning and carrying things home. It felt almost surreal. For years, these errands had been a source of tension or avoidance. Now she approached them with curiosity, care, and a sense of partnership. In the car, she spoke quietly. "I was thinking about last weekend, and the way I treated you. I realize now I was arrogant, selfish, and dismissive. I took so much for granted. I'm really sorry." "It's not just about saying sorry," I said. "It's about ensuring your actions reflect your words. And I can already see that happening." She nodded thoughtfully, her eyes focused on the passing streets. "I want to keep improving. I want to make choices that show I care, not just words that say I do." By the time we returned home, I could see subtle signs that she was taking responsibility beyond household tasks. She began planning her day to balance her schoolwork, personal interests, and helping at home. She even reached out to her friends differently, more considerate, less self-centered. That evening, she came into the living room holding a notebook. "I've been writing," she said, "about how I behave, how I think, and how I can do better." I realized reflection is important, not just reacting or feeling guilty, but understanding and changing. I felt a lump in my throat. The girl who had denied me food and dismissed my presence weeks ago was now making a genuine effort to grow, to acknowledge and to act responsibly. This wasn't just a superficial change, and it was deep, thoughtful, and lasting. Over the next few days, Claire continued to demonstrate consistency. She would wake early, help with meals, plan weekend activities that included both of us, and even start small traditions like leaving notes of appreciation. She began initiating conversations about family, shared responsibilities, and even discussed ways she could support me in my routines. One afternoon, Daniel came home from work and noticed the shift immediately. "Wow," he said, smiling at Claire. "You've really changed. The house feels different, lighter, more alive." "What's going on?" Claire smiled a little shyly. "I'm trying," she said simply. I realized I wasn't noticing how my actions or inactions had affected others. "I want to do better." Daniel looked at me, surprise and approval in his eyes. "Looks like someone finally learned a big lesson," he said quietly. I watched Claire interact with him, laughing at a small joke, offering to help with. Consideration and awareness had begun to define our days. The bond between us, once fragile and strained, was now rooted in respect, shared responsibility, and genuine care. And in that quiet emotional transformation, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Not because of revenge, not because I had been acknowledged, but because the lesson had been internalized. Growth had occurred. Awareness had emerged. And true family, built on understanding and responsibility, had finally begun to thrive. The next morning, Claire woke up before me, something that had become a new habit over the past week. She tiptoed into the kitchen, careful not to wake me, and started preparing breakfast. The smell of scrambled eggs and toasted bread filled the air. It was a small thing, but it spoke volumes of initiative, care, awareness. I walked in half awake and saw her humming softly as she worked. "Good morning," I said, smiling. She turned, slightly startled, and smiled back. "Morning. I made breakfast. Thought it'd be nice to start the day together." That moment felt monumental. For months, Claire had ignored my presence, dismissed my efforts, and acted as though our home revolved solely around her. Now she was stepping into a new role, not perfect, not flawless, but thoughtful, aware, and genuinely responsible. As we ate, she spoke quietly. "I've been thinking about my responsibilities. At home, at school, with friends. I want to be someone who notices the impact of my actions. I don't want to repeat my mistakes." Her sincerity struck me. This wasn't a fleeting gesture or empty words. She had internalized the lesson. She was reflecting, planning, and actively changing her behavior. Later that afternoon, she suggested we go grocery shopping together. Not out of obligation, but because she wanted to help. I agreed, curious to see how she would handle the task. In the store, she carefully selected items, comparing prices, checking the quality of fruits and vegetables, and even making a note of what we might need for the week. She offered to carry the heavier bags, and I noticed her glancing at me, as if silently asking, "Am I doing this right?" "You're doing wonderfully," I said softly. "I can see how much thought you're putting into this." She smiled, slightly embarrassed but proud. "I want to do things properly now. I want my actions to reflect that I care." When we returned home, she didn't just drop the groceries on the counter. She organized them, put away the perishables first, and even prepped ingredients for dinner. That evening, she cooked alongside me, not clumsily or carelessly as she had in the past, but deliberately asking questions, adjusting flavors, and sharing small jokes. Daniel came home later and noticed the change immediately. "Claire, this is impressive," he said, smiling at the aroma and presentation. "You've really stepped up." She looked at me, a mixture of pride and humility in her eyes. "I've been learning," she said. "Not just about cooking or chores, about responsibility, about noticing, caring, and doing better." Her words, simple as they were, carried the weight of growth and understanding. Over the next few days, she continued to demonstrate responsibility consistently, making the bed, helping with homework for younger neighbors, even volunteering to water plants when I had a busy day. One afternoon, she came into the living room holding a notebook. "I've been writing down my reflections," she said, "about my behavior, my choices, and how I can improve. I realized that self-awareness is the first step to real change." Her growth wasn't just practical, it was emotional. She apologized without prompting, acknowledged her past mistakes, and began to treat everyone in the house with consideration. The tension and subtle friction that had defined our home for months was slowly replaced with warmth, laughter, and shared understanding. That weekend, she suggested organizing a small gathering for friends and family. She coordinated decorations, planned a simple menu, and invited everyone thoughtfully. I watched her interact with guests, balancing energy, empathy, and awareness. She was confident, considerate, and truly present, than a far cry from the arrogant, dismissive girl who had denied me basic respect weeks ago. Later that evening, as the house quieted, she came to me again. "I want you to know," she said quietly, "that I'm serious about this. About being responsible, noticing you, and understanding my impact. I want to continue growing." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "I see that, Claire. And that's all anyone could hope for." Actions, awareness, and consistent effort matter more than words. That night, I reflected on the journey from denial, arrogance, and small cruelties to genuine awareness, empathy, and responsibility. I realized the power of patience, subtle boundaries, and allowing natural consequences to teach lessons. Claire had learned not because I forced her, but because life showed her the importance of awareness and choice. The house now felt alive, light, and harmonious. Small gestures of kindness and responsibility had transformed our home, our interactions, and our relationship. And in that quiet transformation, I felt the profound satisfaction of witnessing true growth, not through punishment or confrontation, but through understanding, reflection, and the courage to change. The house felt lighter than it had in months, even years. The air was no longer thick with tension or unspoken resentments. Small acts of kindness, awareness, and shared responsibility had transformed the rhythm of daily life. Claire moved with confidence, but also with consideration. She had grown into her awareness, balancing her youthful energy with empathy and mindfulness. It started with small things, making her bed, preparing breakfast, helping with dinner. But soon it became larger gestures, planning weekend activities, helping younger neighbors, and taking responsibility for shared chores without being asked. Each action was a reflection of the lessons she had absorbed over the past chapters, the subtle consequences, the importance of empathy, and the impact of her words. One Saturday morning, she approached me with a plan. "I thought we could do something for the community this weekend," she said, eyes shining with genuine excitement. "Maybe volunteer at the local shelter or organize a small neighborhood cleanup." I was taken aback, not by the suggestion itself, but by the initiative behind it. "That's wonderful," I replied. "You've really taken the lessons to heart." Her smile widened. "I want to make a difference, not just at home, but out there too." I realized that responsibility isn't limited to one space. It's a mindset, a habit, a choice. The weekend unfolded beautifully. Claire organized the effort with attention to detail, ensuring everyone had a role and felt included. She carried supplies, guided younger volunteers, and handled unexpected problems with patience. Observing her, I felt a surge of pride. The girl who had once denied me respect, who had taken my presence for granted, was now fully stepping into her role as a thoughtful, responsible, and empathetic individual. Back at home, as we prepared dinner that evening, I noticed how natural it felt, the laughter, the shared responsibilities, the light teasing between us. Daniel joined in, noting the change. "This house feels alive again," he said, "like it finally has balance." Claire laughed softly. "It's not just the chores or responsibilities. It's noticing, understanding, and caring for each other, for ourselves, for the people around us." I nodded, realizing that the lesson she had learned was deeper than I had anticipated. It wasn't about punishment, revenge, or proving a point. It was about awareness, growth, and the willingness to change. Later that night, as we sat in the living room reflecting on the day, Claire spoke quietly. "I know I've made mistakes in the past, big ones, but I want you to know that I see the consequences now, and I don't want to repeat them. I want to continue growing, being responsible, and being someone who values others." I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I see that, Claire, and that's all that matters. Growth is ongoing, but you've started on the right path. Your awareness, your choices, and your empathy will guide you further than any lesson I could have forced upon you." As she smiled, I realized something profound. True change comes not from confrontation or anger, but from experience, reflection, and the courage to act differently. Life had taught Claire this lesson in its own way, and she had embraced it fully. Over the next few weeks, the harmony in the house continued to grow. Claire's gestures of awareness became habitual, checking in with me, sharing responsibilities, helping Daniel, and even reaching out to neighbors and friends with genuine and distance to one of collaboration, empathy, and subtle joy. By the time the weekend arrived again, Claire had planned a small family activity. a picnic in the nearby park. She packed sandwiches, drinks, and a blanket, inviting me and Daniel. There was no drama, no arrogance, only careful planning, thoughtfulness, and a genuine desire to spend time together. As we walked under the trees, sunlight filtering through the leaves, I reflected on the journey we had taken. From denial and selfishness to awareness, responsibility and empathy. It had been a long path. But the outcome was clear. Bonds had strengthened, respect had been earned, and harmony had been restored. That evening, sitting on the blanket with the sunset behind us, Claire turned to me. "Thank you for being patient, for not giving up on me even when I didn't deserve it. I finally understand what it means to care, to notice, and to take responsibility." I smiled, a deep sense of peace washing over me. "You've learned it on your own, Claire. That's the most important part. True growth comes from understanding and choosing to act differently. You've done that." And in that quiet, reflective moment, I realized that the lessons of patience, empathy, and natural consequences had not only transformed Claire but had brought new life to our home. The once tense weekends, the small conflicts, and the subtle arrogance had given way to a household filled with awareness, responsibility, and love. A family finally learning to function as a team, with respect and care at its heart. The days after the park picnic carried a gentle rhythm. Claire's gestures of awareness were no longer occasional. They had become a natural part of her daily life. She would check if I needed help before I asked, prepare snacks for the family without being reminded, and even suggest small projects to improve the home. It wasn't just about chores anymore, and it was about mindfulness. She had begun noticing subtle patterns. The way I preferred my tea in the mornings, Daniel's favorite snacks, the little tasks that made our household run smoothly. Each day she contributed not out of obligation, but out of genuine consideration. One evening, as the sun was setting and the warm orange light spilled across the living room, Claire approached me with a notebook. "I've been writing," she said softly. "Not just about what I do, but why I do it. About awareness, responsibility, and empathy. I want to track my growth. I nodded, touched by her dedication. "That's remarkable, Claire. Growth comes from reflection as much as action, and it seems you're committed to both." She smiled, a mixture of pride and humility in her expression. "I want this change to last, not just for a few weeks, but forever. I want to build a life where my actions matter, where I notice others, and where I'm responsible for my words, my deeds, and my relationships." Over the next few days, she began initiating small family. Months had passed since that pivotal weekend, the one where Claire had denied me food and unintentionally set the stage for her own transformation. In that time, our household had undergone a profound shift. Small acts of consideration had become habits. Patience, awareness, and empathy were no longer abstract ideas. They had taken root in daily life. Claire had evolved beyond mere acknowledgement of her mistakes. She now internalized responsibility, understanding that every action carried consequences, both subtle and profound. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was about consistent awareness, noticing needs, and acting with kindness and thoughtfulness. One morning, as I sipped my coffee by the window, I watched Claire in the kitchen. She moved with a calm efficiency, preparing breakfast for herself, Daniel, and me. But this time there was no hesitation, no self-consciousness. She had grown confident in her new role, not the role of a submissive stepdaughter, but that of an engaged, empathetic, and responsible young adult. "I'm making pancakes today," she said, looking up with a smile. "Figured we could all start the day together." I smiled, feeling a warmth that had been absent for years. "I think that's wonderful." Breakfast became more than a meal. It became a ritual of connection. Conversation flowed freely, laughter filled the kitchen, and mutual respect was evident in every interaction. Claire shared updates about her school, friends, and personal projects, but also asked about my day, my thoughts, and even small concerns I had never voiced before. Later that day, Claire suggested we help a neighbor who was struggling with yard work. "I thought it would be a good way to give back," she said. "And I want to apply everything I've learned about noticing, helping, and being responsible." I agreed, observing her as she organized tasks, delegated small responsibilities, and guided younger volunteers with patience. Her confidence and empathy were striking. This was not the same girl who had denied me food out of arrogance or frustration. This was someone who had faced the consequences of her actions, reflected deeply, and chosen a different path. As we returned home, Daniel noticed her transformation immediately. "Claire, I don't even recognize this energy," he said. "You've become thoughtful, deliberate, and really kind. The house feels different and alive almost. You're incredible." Claire blushed slightly but looked genuinely proud. "I've been learning," she said softly. "Not just for you or Mom, but for me. I want to be someone who sees the impact of her actions, who values others, and who makes conscious choices." That evening, the three of us sat together quietly, reflecting on the week. Claire spoke again, her voice calm and sincere. "I understand now that my past actions were selfish. I didn't notice the people who cared for me, who sacrificed for me, and who trusted me. I want to honor that trust, not out of obligation, because it's the right thing to do." I reached over and held her hand. "You've learned the most important lesson of all. That empathy, awareness, and responsibility are chosen, not forced. And you've chosen well." The following weeks continued in this pattern of growth. Claire took initiative at home, in school, and in her community. She helped organize events, volunteered her time, and even coached younger friends on cooperation and respect. She had become a leader in small ways, not through dominance or control, but through consistent awareness, patience, and empathy. One night as I prepared tea, she came into the kitchen with a soft smile. "I've been thinking," she said. "I want to keep growing, keep noticing, keep learning. I want my actions to reflect my awareness, not just my words. I finally understand that growth is a lifelong journey." I nodded, touched deeply. "And you've already made incredible progress. Life will continue to teach lessons, but you're ready to face them with empathy and responsibility." That weekend, she organized a small family gathering at home. Daniel, neighbors, and a few close friends came. Claire planned the menu, helped set up the space, and welcomed everyone warmly. Observing her, I felt a sense of pride and relief. The lessons had fully taken root. The girl who had once dismissed me and denied basic respect had transformed into a thoughtful, empathetic, and responsible young adult. As the evening wound down, Claire approached me and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I didn't deserve it. I finally see what it means to care, to notice, and to be responsible." I smiled, feeling a deep, lasting peace. "You've learned it, Claire. That's all that matters. True growth comes from within, through awareness, reflection, and choice. And you've made that choice." In that quiet, cinematic moment, I realized the profound truth. Revenge or anger could never have produced this transformation. Only patience, subtle boundaries, reflection, and natural consequences could guide someone toward genuine growth. Claire had learned empathy, responsibility, and awareness, and in doing so, she had strengthened not only her own character, but the bonds of our family forever. The house, once filled with tension and indifference, now radiated warmth, laughter, and harmony. Small gestures of care, mindful actions, and conscious choices had replaced selfishness and neglect. And as I looked at Claire, I knew this transformation was not temporary. It was permanent, rooted deeply in understanding, choice, and love. The weeks that followed the family gathering felt almost magical. The change in Claire wasn't superficial. It was deep, consistent, and lasting. She no longer performed thoughtful actions as a reaction to past mistakes. They had become instinctive. She noticed when I was tired, asked Daniel how his day went, and even anticipated small tasks without needing guidance. Watched her preparing a simple. The previous arrogance, the entitlement, the dismissiveness, all had vanished, replaced by maturity and empathy. "I thought I'd try a new recipe tonight," she said with a small grin. "Something simple but meaningful. I want to show that care isn't just in big gestures, but in daily actions." I smiled, moved by her thoughtfulness. "It's perfect, Claire. The effort itself matters more than the outcome." She laughed lightly. "I'm learning that. Every small thing counts, and noticing others counts too." Over the next few days, Claire extended her awareness beyond the household. She reached out to neighbors, helped friends with responsibilities, and even volunteered for a local charity event. Her confidence had evolved into humility, and her empathy was now visible in every interaction. One quiet afternoon, she came to me with a journal in hand. "I've been writing down my reflections," she said. "Not just what I did, but why I did it. I want to make sure I continue growing, so that I don't forget these lessons." I felt a lump in my throat. The girl who had once ignored me, dismissed me, and even caused tension in the house was now actively seeking growth, reflection, and understanding. That's incredible, Claire. Self-reflection is the key to lifelong learning. You're doing exactly what you need to do. The home had completely transformed. Breakfast together, shared meals, laughter-filled evenings, and small, thoughtful gestures defined our days. Every member of the family felt the shift. Daniel noticed her empathy, I noticed her awareness, and even neighbors commented on her considerate nature. One evening, while we were all sitting together in the living room, Claire turned to me quietly. "I finally understand," she said. "It's not about doing things for recognition or out of fear. It's about noticing, caring, and being responsible, because it matters. Because it affects real people, and I don't want to ever forget that." I reached over and held her hand. "You've internalized Thelison, Claire. That's all anyone could hope for. Your growth is real, and your choices will continue to shape the family, your relationships, and yourself in positive ways." Weeks turned into months, and the transformation became a permanent part of our household dynamic. Claire took initiative in organizing family events, helping with errands and mentoring younger cousins and friends. The energy of the house shifted completely, from tension and indifference to warmth, laughter, and shared responsibility. Even simple routines, like folding laundry or preparing meals, became opportunities for connection. Claire began leaving small notes of encouragement or appreciation, something she had never done before. Each note, small as it was, reinforced the trust, respect, and emotional bonds that had been painstakingly rebuilt over months. One weekend, she surprised us by organizing a family reflection evening. She prepared snacks, arranged a cozy seating area, and invited each of us to share thoughts, reflections, and gratitude. We laughed, shared stories, and even reminisced about past mistakes, acknowledging how far we had come. It was an emotional, healing experience for all of us, and it reminded me that her growth was not fleeting, but profound and genuine. As the night drew to a close, she looked at me with soft eyes. "Thank you for your patience, your guidance, and for letting me learn on my own. I finally see the value of responsibility, empathy, and awareness." I smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment deeper than I had imagined. "You've learned it, Claire. Not because I forced you, but because you chose to understand and grow. That choice will continue to guide you for life." In that moment, I realized the true power of patient guidance, natural consequences, and empathetic teaching. The girl who had once been self-centered, dismissive, and entitled had transformed into a thoughtful, responsible, and caring young adult. And in doing so, she had restored harmony, trust, and love within our family. The house, once filled with tension and resentment, now radiated peace, understanding, and subtle joy. Every small gesture reinforced the lessons learned. Every shared moment strengthened bonds, and every act of responsibility reflected the depth months had passed since the pivotal events that had transformed our household. What had begun as tension, resentment, and denial had evolved into understanding, empathy, and genuine responsibility. Claire, once self-centered and dismissive, had grown into a thoughtful and considerate young adult, fully aware of the consequences of her actions. I often found myself reflecting on the journey, the small moments, the conflicts, the patience, and the quiet lessons. What struck me most was how subtle guidance, boundaries, and natural consequences had shaped not just Claire, but the entire family dynamic. One morning, as I sipped my coffee by the window, Claire came in carrying a small tray of breakfast, pancakes, her little twist on syrup drizzled just the way I liked it. She smiled softly, placing the tray on the table. "Good morning," she said. I looked at her, truly seeing the change in her demeanor. Confident yet humble, thoughtful yet energetic, aware yet free. "Good morning, Claire. This looks wonderful." She shrugged lightly. "I've been learning about noticing, caring, and taking responsibility. I want to make sure I don't forget these lessons, ever." Her words carried the weight of self-awareness, reflection, and genuine growth. It was no longer about avoiding punishment or proving a point. It was about understanding the impact of her actions and choosing to act with empathy and care. Over the next few weeks, the household continued to thrive. Claire initiated small family activities, and from game nights to weekend cooking sessions. Event, coordinating friends and family with patience and empathy. Daniel noticed the transformation too. It's incredible to see how far she's come, he said one evening, watching Claire manage a group of children helping with decorations. The house feels complete now. Balanced, harmonious, alive. I nodded in agreement. Growth like this isn't instant. It's slow, consistent, and requires reflection. But once it takes root, it changes everything. That evening, Claire sat with me in the living room holding her journal. I've been writing down everything I've learned, she said. Not just the actions, but the feelings, the reflections, and the lessons. I want to remember them, to continue growing and being responsible, aware and empathetic. I reached for her hand, a quiet smile on my face. You've already learned so much, Claire. What you've internalized will guide you through life. These lessons are yours now, and they will help shape the person you become. The subtle joy and harmony in the household were evident in every interaction. Shared meals, laughter-filled evenings, and mutual care. Each small gesture reinforced the bonds that had been rebuilt through patience, guidance, and conscious reflection. Looking back, I realized the true lesson. Lasting change cannot be forced. It comes from experience, reflection, and the conscious choice to grow. Claire had learned not through anger or punishment, but through the natural consequences of her actions, the boundaries set patiently, and the empathy modeled by those around her. The house, once a place of tension and subtle conflict, now radiated warmth, understanding, and mutual respect. Our family had grown stronger, not because of perfection, but because of awareness, reflection, and consistent, thoughtful action. As Claire helped Daniel with the dishes that evening, laughing softly at a minor spill, I felt a profound sense of peace. The girl who had once denied me food, who had ignored boundaries, and acted out of selfishness had transformed. She had embraced empathy, responsibility, and awareness, and in doing so, had helped restore harmony and love within our home. In that quiet, reflective moment, I knew that our family was stronger than ever. Bonds had been rebuilt, lessons had been learned, and respect and care were now woven into the fabric of our lives. The journey had been long, emotional, and sometimes difficult, but the results were undeniable. A home filled with trust, understanding, and lasting love. And as I watched Claire smile, helping with the last of the chores, I realized the ultimate truth: growth, empathy, and awareness are the foundations of strong family bonds. Once internalized, they can transform even the most challenging relationships, bringing peace, harmony, and joy that lasts a lifetime. Claire's transformation didn't just change our home. It began to ripple outward, touching friends, neighbors, and even casual acquaintances. Her newfound empathy and responsibility were no longer contained within our walls. They were becoming a part of how she interacted with the world. One afternoon, she invited a few friends over to help organize a small community project, a park cleanup combined with a charity drive for local families. She took the lead, delegating tasks, keeping track of supplies, and ensuring everyone's contributions were valued. I watched from a distance, amazed at how natural her leadership had become. "You've really changed, Claire," one of her friends said, smiling. "It's inspiring to see how thoughtful and organized you are." Claire shrugged, a little embarrassed but proud. "I just try to notice what needs to be done and help where I can. I realize that small acts can make a big difference." Her words, simple as they were, reflected the depth of her growth. She had learned responsibility not as a chore, but as a mindset, a conscious choice to act with awareness and empathy. The next day, Daniel and I noticed a subtle shift in the neighborhood. Neighbors who had previously been distant now approached Claire for advice or to offer thanks for her initiative. Even the local children, who often ran wild without guidance, began to see her as a positive example. Her transformation had created a ripple effect, one small act of growth leading to a series of positive changes around her. One evening, as we gathered for a casual family dinner, Claire shared a story from that day. Mrs. Thompson said that because of the charity drive, a family she knew wouldn't go hungry this week, and some kids in the park learned to work together for the first time. It feels good. Really good. I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "See? Your awareness and responsibility aren't just improving our household. They're improving the world around you." Claire's smile was soft, genuine. I never thought about it that way before. I used to just think about myself, about what I wanted, what I deserved. But now I see that noticing others and taking action matters more than anything else. Her words reminded me of the power of reflection, patience, and subtle guidance. What had begun as a lesson within our home had grown into something far larger. A lesson in empathy, awareness, and responsibility that she was now applying in her community. Over the following weeks, Claire continued to initiate small projects. She tutored younger children, helped organize neighborhood events, and even started a small journal, club with friends, focused on personal growth and self-reflection. The ripple effect of her transformation was visible, everywhere, in the smiles of those she helped, in the gratitude of neighbors, and in the improved harmony of our family life. Daniel noticed it too. "It's amazing to see how much positive energy she's spreading," he said one evening. "She's not just a stepdaughter anymore, she's a leader. A role model and a force for good." Claire laughed softly. I'm just trying to apply what I've learned. Noticing, caring, acting responsibly. That's all anyone can do. And yet that small effort had a profound impact. Our home, once a place of tension and subtle conflict, was now a hub of connection, growth, and positivity. Claire's choices had created waves of change, proving that empathy, responsibility, and awareness could extend far beyond the immediate family, touching friends, neighbors, and even strangers in meaningful ways. That night, as I reflected on the journey, I realized something important. True growth doesn't stop at self-improvement. It spreads outward, creating a ripple effect that can transform communities, strengthen relationships, and inspire others to act with care and awareness. Claire had learned this firsthand, and in doing so, she had become an example of how personal growth can shape the world around us. In that quiet moment, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The lesson had come full circle. From denial and arrogance to awareness, empathy and responsibility, Claire's journey had created lasting change, not just in our home, but in the community we lived in. And as I watched her laugh with friends, guiding a group of younger children in a small project she had organized, I realized that the ripple effect of one person's growth could truly change everything. The air in the house felt different that morning is calm, warm, and full of gentle laughter. Over the months, the household had transformed from tension and subtle resentment into a home of harmony, respect, and understanding. Claire's journey from arrogance and denial to awareness and responsibility had not only changed her but had reshaped the family dynamic entirely. I sat by the window, watching her prepare breakfast. With the same thoughtfulness and care she had displayed consistently over the past weeks, each movement was deliberate yet effortless, a clear reflection of her internal growth. The once spoiled and self-centered stepdaughter was now confident, empathetic, and mindful, a young woman who understood the value of her actions and their impact on others. "Good morning," she said softly, placing a tray with toast, eggs, and coffee in front of me. "Good morning, Claire," I replied, smiling. "Everything looks wonderful." She hesitated for a moment before speaking again, her eyes thoughtful. "I've been reflecting a lot on everything that happened, on my behavior, my mistakes, and how I reacted to the consequences of my actions. I realized that true growth isn't just about doing the right thing, because you're told to. It's about understanding why it matters and choosing it willingly." I felt a lump in my throat. Her words reflected more than just politeness or surface-level change. They carried depth, introspection, and a genuine desire to continue growing. "That's true, Claire. Growth that comes from understanding is lasting, and I can see that you've learned this lesson well. Learned every day and every little thing I do." At that moment, I realized how far she had come. From denying me food and acting dismissive, to taking initiative in our home, volunteering in the community, and reflecting on her choices. Her transformation was complete. But what made it remarkable was not just the change itself, but the consistency and depth of her growth. Later that day, Daniel and I watched her interact with neighbors and younger cousins. She guided them patiently, laughed with them warmly, and even helped mediate a small disagreement between two children. Her empathy and awareness were evident in every action, every word, and every glance. Daniel leaned over and whispered, "She's incredible. It's amazing to see how much she's grown. The house feels complete." I nodded, quietly reflecting on the journey. This wasn't about punishment, revenge, or teaching her a lesson through conflict. It had been about allowing natural consequences, setting boundaries and giving space for reflection. That approach had reshaped her mindset, and in doing so, it had strengthened the entire family. That evening, Claire approached me with her journal in hand. I've been documenting everything. My reflections, my small victories, and even the moments I still need to improve on, she said. I want to remember these lessons so I can continue growing every day. I took her hand gently. That's the most important step, Claire. Awareness, reflection, and consistent effort will guide you for life. You've already come so far, and I can see that you'll continue to grow in ways that inspire those around you. As I watched her walk back to her room, a deep sense of fulfillment washed over me. The girl who had once denied me food acted dismissively, and tested boundaries had transformed into a thoughtful, responsible, and empathetic young woman. And in her growth, the entire household had found harmony, respect, and love. This was more than a lesson learned. It was a life-changing journey, a story of reflection, consequence, empathy, and lasting growth. And the home, now filled with laughter, care, and understanding, was living proof of the power of patience, guidance, and the courage to change. The evening sun cast a warm glow across the living room, filling the house with golden light. Claire sat beside me, her journal open, reflecting on the months that had passed. She looked calm, confident, and deeply aware of the journey she had undertaken. From denial and arrogance to awareness, responsibility, and empathy, I've been thinking, she said softly, about everything that happened, about how I treated you, how I acted, and the lessons I learned. I understand now that my actions have consequences, not just for me, but for everyone around me. I nodded, feeling a surge of pride and relief. Exactly, Claire. That awareness is what makes all the difference. You've grown, not just in behavior, but in understanding. That night we prepared a small family dinner together. Daniel joined in, laughing and joking, while Claire took the lead in organizing the table and preparing dishes. The home, once tense and divided, now radiated harmony, laughter, and warmth. As we ate, Claire shared a moment of reflection. I realize now that denying respect or kindness to others doesn't make anyone stronger. True strength comes from awareness, empathy, and taking responsibility for your actions. I've learned that the hard way, but I'll carry it with me forever. I reached over and held her hand. You've embraced the most important lesson of all. Growth is a choice, awareness is a habit, and empathy is the true measure of character. You've proven that even the most challenging lessons can lead to lasting change. After dinner, Claire helped clear the dishes, and then we all sat together in the living room. She began sharing ideas for small acts of kindness, not just within the family, but in her school, neighborhood, and community. Her reflection was thoughtful, intentional, and inspiring, a reminder that the lessons she had learned were not temporary, but lifelong principles. Later, as the house grew quiet, I reflected on the journey we had traveled together. From a moment of denial and tension, a path of patience, reflection, and subtle guidance had led to true transformation. Claire had learned to notice, care, and act responsibly. The house, once filled with conflict, was now alive with understanding, respect, and love. The ultimate truth was clear: growth cannot be forced. Lessons that come from reflection, natural consequences, and empathy are the ones that last. Claire's journey had created a ripple effect within the family, in the community, and within herself. As I watched her smile quietly, sitting with her journal, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The story had reached its natural end, but its lessons would continue indefinitely. Patience, awareness, empathy, and responsibility are the keys to harmony, growth, and lasting love. In that quiet cinematic moment, I realized that our family had been forever changed, not by anger, confrontation, or revenge, but by the power of understanding, reflection, and conscious choice. And that ultimately was the greatest lesson of all.